Hi guys, welcome to today's webinar series, which is sponsored with our partner broker, Ingot Africa Ltd. Today we will be discussing more on trading psychology with our guest speakers being John Barnes and Evan Mark. Welcome.
They are our partner brokers for this particular webinar. So I'm just gonna give the mic to John and Evan to first of all introduce themselves, the team from Rethink Group, and then we can get started. And with me is Faith, my colleague at STL.
Traded over time, started working with Denise as a client and then as a coach, and work with all manner of clients throughout C-suite, athletes, traders, hedge fund managers, people like that. And it's been outstanding. I love working with my clients. It's an honor to help people see themselves more clearly. So that's kind of the thumbnail sketch for me.
My name is Evan Marks. Once again, thanks for having me. I spent 25 plus years managing money on Wall Street, long short equity hedge fund for most of my career. I rejoined Rethink in end of 2017 when I sold my equity stake in my fund. I was also a client of Denise's, and now I'm coaching with the Rethink Group for the last 5+ years. It's been an incredible journey. You know, spending so much time on trading floors, you see behavior, you know, up and close, and you realize how the old school thinking of coaching. I had coaches from Ari Kiev and some of these well-known coaches in the beginning. And the show, you know, the show method and the Rethink Group just thinks differently of how emotions are important and how we use them to our advantage. And it was amazing. I wish I knew what I know now when I started my career, because I think it might have been, it would have been a little different, I believe. So it's been a great journey so far. Like John said, I love working with my clients, just trying to solve what's going on and help them to become better traders, better people, you know, happier, more fulfilled, you know. And it's just not Wall Street. You know, we start with NASCAR, professional athletes, C-suite executives, and it's a great environment where people want to get better. And I think it's an honor to help them.
All right. It's interesting that you both started out as traders first before you became coaches and performance coaches, so that at least you have both experiences, both as traders and now as coaches. So maybe, Evan, as we start, you can tell us the importance of traders, all kinds of traders, nurturing their mental capital.
Well, we all have history behind us, right? How we grew up, how we were raised, and all these things unconsciously play into the hand of a trader, trying to prove ourselves, validating ourselves. We're not good enough, risk, all these things come into play. And what engulfs it all are our emotions. So early on, when we feel nervous, afraid, ashamed, scared, we perceive that as negative. But if we're able to acknowledge and cultivate those feelings and the energy that they have into a positive behavior, a lot of things change, right? When we talk about on the trading side, like impulsivity, needing to do it, you feel your body move, you go into automatic fight or flight. Imagine if we're able to slow that down, acknowledge that feeling, pause for a second, and then actually make a decision that's beneficial to us today. That's an amazing thing. And it sounds so simple, but we know it's not. But through training, we can do that. Now, why am I feeling that and why? Well, the why is very important, right? That comes from childhood, from past experiences. But once we untangle that and loosen that anchor, to have that freedom to make decisions that serve us today is extremely important. So when we're in that moment in fight or flight and we feel that tensity and then we make a decision, not the greatest place to be. But if we could understand how we're feeling and use that to our advantage, imagine the possibilities. So spending so much time on Wall Street and trading, I know now, you know, and like you said before, like I'm lucky I traded before I did this, because I can understand what people go through. I don't share the same experiences they do because we're all different people. But to understand that is extremely important.
All right. And John, maybe you can just touch on, for traders to achieve optimal performance, what role does enough sleep and exercise, just for general body well-being, what role does that play,
Yeah, I think the physical aspect of what we do outside of trading affects our trading as well as the mental aspect of things. And certainly being well rested, we know that through some research that decision-making, risk-taking in particular, is affected by a lack of sleep. And other things say that, getting less than, I think it was 6 hours of sleep equates to having 3 drinks or something like that. So it definitely affects how our brain works. And it as we know, making risk decisions, we need to have all of our faculties, but it also affects how we feel and what kind of the spectrum of feelings that we can have. If we're tired, we may be prone to have a certain set of patterns of feelings that make decision-making more difficult. And so having an adequate amount of sleep, and certainly recognizing when we get less sleep than we need is important to understand, because we're more prone to do risky things when we have a lack of sleep. The physical aspect of things, I think, for me, I always thought of these as edges. An edge is an advantage from trading, in trading, an edge is an advantage. And I think of all these things as stackable edges. So if you're physically ready to trade and your body is feeling good, that's an edge. If you get good sleep, another edge. If you do, good nutrition, and then we get to more nuanced that have more direct correlation or impact to trading of, knowing what your trades are, knowing how you feel and why, and understanding the patterns of behavior within your trading system that you have. So I think all of these are important, and there's, meditation and cold and all sorts of other things that we can create 3 hours of content about that we're not here to do. But I think that kind of and I think those are very important and something that I have focused a lot of attention and time on. So, yeah.
All right. So then what do you tell your clients when they come to you and they tell you, I feel like I have a mental block and I still need to trade and I still need to, especially if they are trading on an institutional level, what do you normally advise them?
Well, first we try to go back to understand, when did this happen? And typically there is something that happens where we combine, like Evan was talking about, something from the past and superimpose it over this present moment. I wrote a blog about this, about the yips in both golf and baseball, and used an example of this guy named Steve Sachs, who had a mental block because he made a bad throw. And we can say, if we make this bad trade and our boss jumps on us, and it was right before we were going to get the bonus we wanted, and we made this mistake, those kind of get combined with something from the past, coach yelling at us or some bad feeling from our parents. And then we can't separate those two going forward, and it makes the decisions hard. So going back and understand when it happened, why it happened, putting lots and lots of words around it, being able to be upset and feel all the feelings, shame, disappointment, anger, all of those, writing them out is one way, but it's better to talk to somebody like Evan or I to get the words out and start to, as Evan said earlier, untangle some of the things. So that would be where I would start. Evan, what?
And it's also interesting because, when clients come to us, they think it's about something, about that one leaf, and it's never about the leaf. Our job is to listen to things that they're not saying. So they may think it's something when they're stuck, and it's never about that. It's something that is from the past, something that keeps happening, even though it looks like a different experience. It's the same experience. They just think it's different. And once you're able to understand that, because obviously people come to us when they're stuck, right? Now, stuck is, stuck performance, unfulfilled, whatever it may be. It's never what they think it is. So over the course of a conversation, you start to unravel what was going on before, what happened in the past, right? Because some of the past predicts the future, right? The pain in the past, anxiety in the future. So once you're able to understand that as a coach, what they think it is never what they think it is. And when you're able to understand that and work through that, that's when you start becoming unstuck, or whatever the term may be. And then they start to open their eyes, like, wait a second, that's a possibility.
And that we think about, and effectively what that is, and kind of the layman's terms, is we repeat experiences, emotional experiences from the past. I believe it's our psyche giving us the opportunity to solve the problem or work through it. And we see that in trading, because trading is kind of a Rorschach test of our past in the market, and gives us opportunities to act things out from the past with the market, again, in this Freudian idea of the repetition compulsion. And as Evan said, since the repetition is by definition unconscious, we don't know we're doing it. And that's why it takes somebody, as Evan said, oftentimes what people think they're working on is not really at the heart of it. And there's lots of levels to this stuff. And so, yeah, it's fun, interesting, and difficult at the same time.
Cool. And then you also work with athletes as well. So just to compare trading to like athletics, for example, would you say that trading is a sprint or a marathon, especially for retail, both retail and fund managers, for example?
Yeah, well, trading is an infinite game, and all other things are finite games. And so what the kind of the main differences between a finite and an infinite game are: in a finite game like sports, there are defined rules that govern the game, and an end to the game, a finite end to the game. Even in cricket, which can go on for days, from what I understand, there is an end to the game, and that's predefined. In infinite games, there's no end. The rules are nebulous. There's no definition of winning or losing in the more traditional sense. And that's where trading falls. I would often say to people that, like, the main goal of a trader is to be able to do it tomorrow. And the other thing is, even when we were doing well on the trading floor, I remember some guy talking about how he was struggling. I'm like, we're all 3 bad months away from being done. And that's a fact. Like, and that's part of the reason that trading is such a grind, is that, great, you made money yesterday, but we have to go in tomorrow. And so, again, understanding that type of thing. Sorry, Evan, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, John. Go.
No, I'm done. Yeah.
But, it's interesting, when you talk about sports and trading, you deal with a lot of uncertainty, right? So it's so important to be so comfortable with that uncertainty, but also certain in your behavior, right? Because, like they say, trading is the biggest self-development game in the world, right? Where else can you sit down for 5 minutes and feel the rainbow of emotions? It's really crazy. Sports, like John said, there's set rules, but in trading, there's uncertainty. It's 24, it just continues. So you really have to become so comfortable with that uncertainty, so fluid with it, but at the same time, rigid in how you behave. Now, when we say that, it's how am I feeling? What's going on? That constant checking in with yourself. When I traded, my assistant would be like, how are you feeling? I go, I'm nervous. Because you're nervous every single day. I go, yeah, for 25 years. Why? I go, it works for me. Now, for other people, when they're nervous, things may happen. But for me, I dial into that. That's an important feeling to me. So that my nervousness is my intuition. It's telling me something. Right. So when we go back to trading, like all these feelings give you data. So you need this data and this uncertainty to pick a behavior that's favorable for you that actually serves you today. When we talk about survival, that's how the brain's wired. But some of these actions that we had in the past don't help us anymore. So we have to pick behaviors now in this uncertainty in trading that help us, that serve us. It really, trading is 95% mental. I think life is 90% mental, but I think trading is more mental.
Yeah.
And to really understand that and embrace that, that's a great thing. And John said earlier about edges, about exercise, nutrition. It's all connected. You need that. But all that is necessary. So when you're in the game of trading, you're present. That all that training you've done outside the ring, you can use within it. And that helps being really, really conscious of what you're doing and how you're feeling.
All right.
Listen, trading is a very difficult game, but it's a very rewarding game when you're doing what you want to do in a sea of uncertainty.
And maybe because most of you at your time, you started off on the floor of like Chicago, maybe Mercantile Exchange, and you had like interactions with real trading on the floor. So maybe now, because the trading is internet, you just wake up every day and log into your trading platform and trade in isolation mostly. Unless you're trading as a group of traders on like a fund or whatever. Like, what role can you say has been different in terms of social interactions, especially with like-minded traders back then, and the differences between now when it comes to individual trading performance? Has there been any changes that you have experienced from your clients? So basically the social interactions and how that affects individual trading performance from your experience with clients.
Yeah. So for me on the floor, what I didn't realize at the time, and I kind of realized over time since I left the floor, was that, on the floor, I could feel what everybody was going to do. Like if a guy over my right shoulder was getting a little jumpy, I would see an order that was close and everybody would be watching this order. And I would feel him get ready to go. And then I could make the decision. Do I want to jump it? Do I want to wait? Because I traded options. So we were watching futures, because as the futures price changes, the option price changes. And so, watching those two interact, I had to make some multi-dimensional decision of, is this guy going to go? Are the futures going to continue in the way that I need? And how many futures do I need to get out of? So that aspect of things, I didn't think was transferable. But it really is, because the market is just a bunch of people. So it's a very social game. And as you start to understand that, you can see the people in the market as the price starts to change. And so for me, going off the floor, I didn't realize that was the case. To your point, it did feel very isolating and lonely to trade what I was trading by myself after I left the floor. Got a headset at one point and was able to interact, but that was just not the same. But I do think, having people around that you can interact with, whether it's a chat room, again, after you understand what you're doing, so the chat room doesn't cause you to take all sorts of different trades all over the place. But I do think having that social interaction with people who understand, that's the other thing too, is that people don't understand the game that we play. Trading is very specific. And as some people can talk about it, but people who really do it, it's like anything else. At a high level, like understands like. And, just like I think I understand baseball pretty well, talking to my baseball clients, I really don't understand how to play baseball at a professional level very well at all. And so, again, understanding that aspect of things, I think is helpful. And that is one of the roles that we serve as a coach, is to be able to have somebody who understands what they're trying to do at a high level, be able to interact, but also to do this other thing that we do, listen to what they're really trying to say and do. And one of the things that I think I do is listen for patterns of thoughts and behavior, and then just ask questions around that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but understanding why those patterns. So that's kind of my answer. What are your thoughts, Evan?
You know, I spent, decades on trading floors, and it's interesting because it's just a microcosm of what's going on in the world and on the street. Not everybody's the same. So when John talks about theory of mind, how people think, it's a social experiment. So to be able to sit in a room and watch John and Liz and know how they react, there's 10,000 of them out there. So to be able to get a feel of panic, euphoria, and get a gauge, a sentiment of what's going on is incredible. And if you have a skill set and able to read that, it's extremely useful. And also human contact, right? We're human beings. When you read about these blue regions where people live forever, it seems like there's human contact. It's important to have people next to you. But now as we go remote, and when I moved to the burbs, I didn't want to go down to Wall Street anymore, so I got another office. But then you feel isolated, right? It's in, even if John's sitting next to you, you can still see him, right? And it means something. But as you go remote, it does become isolating. So whether you're plugged into a chat room or, I was plugged into the office, but to not have that environment is difficult sometimes. And that's what John says, when you have a coach, somebody to talk to. Listen, in that trading room, I'm not sharing all my emotions with people, right? Because I don't want to give up my hand, right? I want to be validated. I don't want them to think that I'm nervous or I'm scared, right? It's very difficult because you want to set up this perception. But as we know, perception is perception. But when you're able to talk to somebody about it, it's incredible. So now when you go remote, it makes it harder. But to have a coach or have somebody you trade with is extremely important. But at the same point, this is why it's such a difficult game, because now if you're not confident and you're leaning on somebody else, that affects you as well.
All right. As we conclude, maybe you can both share with us your parting shot. This, I think, will also be the last time this year before we close off for the festivities. And then we'd, of course, love to host you guys and the Rethink group on our lounge in the future. So maybe you can just give us your parting shots.
Parting shot. I think generally, the more we can understand what we are trying to do in the markets, what our system or style is, the more we're able to understand what we're not trying to do. And so, I think it's important to understand that. The second level is understanding, as Evan said, what do we feel, and have a bunch of words to do that. I would print out a list of emotion words and place it next to your trading system. And so you could look at the words and say, I feel anxious, or whatever the case may be. And I think understanding that it's a process over time that we can get better at. And I think also the more we can give ourselves some compassion and not beat ourselves up, I think the better we have of understanding what we actually feel and moving forward to use that with our trading. So that would be mine. Evan would have something more.
What are we trying to accomplish, right? What am I trying to accomplish here, right? It's an intellectual question, but it goes deeper than that. For traders to be able to slow things down a little bit, like what John and I are talking about in a client-coach relationship. People are saying, when am I going to see results? And I say, I have no idea. They're like, what do you mean, no idea? I said, things take time. To give yourself not time, but training. So basically, feel your feelings. Pause for a second. Be conscious of them. And then pick a behavior, a decision, an action, a response. Slow things down at first. Get to know yourself, right? If you're nervous, what does that nervousness feel like? When John just said how this emotions are huge, write them down. You know, before you make a check mark if you feel the sensation. Get to know your body, get to know your personal data. Build your personal dictionary. When I'm scared, this is what it feels like. This is what this means. Now, it sounds like a lot of work, but it's necessary. If you want to take it to the next level, you really have to understand yourself.
Thank you guys for tuning in and joining us in today's webinar session. We were able to have an in-depth conversation today on trading psychology with the Rethink Group team, John Burns and Evans Mark. And to understand more about mental block for traders and how you can be able to achieve optimal performance, kindly watch this webinar. And we also thank our sponsor broker Ingot Africa Ltd and encourage you guys to trade on our trading platform.